things down a little bit, but I make some choice. How quickly can I figure out if that's where you want to go? And I think the journey metaphor, I didn't create it. I just lifted it like most of the things I've done, just hopefully not wrecked them too much. But I think it should connotate that it's important to take someone somewhere. It's not always about conversions. It's not always about subscriptions. If it's a pacemaker, you're not really taking the patient anywhere other than hopefully not killing them.
Right.
But you're taking the patient somewhere with the data you're gathering for the physician, and the physician typically doesn't know how to talk to you about all the tacit knowledge that they have when they make decisions.
Right.
And so they don't really even know to say, gather this data in this frequency in this way. They know it when they sort of see it. And so if you say, I have this device inside this person, I want to gather this information, you don't have to put the device inside the person. You can have a fake patient. You can show it to a physician. But the physician doesn't want to just say, hey, show me random data. They want to say, this patient with this abnormality in their heartbeat, I need to look at this information. If I looked at that information, then I could go back and make a better decision for the patient. And so that single thing that person's trying to do, that's what I'm thinking of as customer journey. Now, I've done some more traditional customer journeys for I worked at a place that was a really successful retail company. They wanted to rush out and buy this thing so they could sell their stuff online. And I was like, other people can sell your stuff better than you.
Yeah.
Do you really want to do that?
Yeah.
And I said, well, let's just look at how does someone discover you and how do they end up with your product at home? So we did a journey that was not just digitally focused. And we found out that one of the reasons people bought stuff is because their friends told them a really cool story. So it allowed them to publish something that was just stories about their products and then still hand off the POS, the sale, to another group. So they didn't have to own that because they didn't have a big IT shop. And we said, okay, let's publish a few of these around a subset of products and see, first of all, who's reading them. How long are they reading them? How often are they sharing them? Because if our guess is that storytelling drives sales, we could measure sales, but let's measure this stuff upstream. And that cost us almost nothing.
Yeah.
Because publishing those pages was the biggest effort was actually getting the narrative.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Super cheap. Orders of magnitude cheaper.
These people coming out with their MBAs need to have a better understanding of the software development process because they're going to hit it at some point.
Yeah, it's just they can make a choice of say, how can I use that to my advantage?
Right.
Actually so back to your question, how do I help groups? Let's say I walk into an ecosystem where it's one product, one team. It's isolated just to make it a simple example. I've been trying to get groups to kind of think of one team, two cadences. Instead of just having a sprint cadence, which is usually focused around learning by shipping or learning by building, let's take your backlog, if you will, and we'll split it into things we want to do discovery work on, things we want to do delivery work on. Because the discovery work I've been kind of saying to people is outside of production or in simple language, outside of the code. Like, how can we learn? Now, you used a word that for me in the 90s was just poison, prototype, because it usually meant crappy stuff that we ship and then we paid for.
Well, what I found is that nobody could agree on what that meant.
Yeah, right. But in today's world, we can that's what may be good about the JavaScript space is you can prototype stuff really fast, and then you're not going to take it away and giving them something else. You can actually build that pretty quick. So what if we took some of these unicorns who are sort of like closet designers with pretty go faster JavaScript skills, and we said, this 2 weeks, you use Scrum language, this sprint, you're going to do mostly discovery work. We're going to produce some stuff, and we're going to put it in front of people. And we're either going to put it in front of people and watch them directly, or we're going to send it out to a subset of people and we're going to watch it analytically.
Yeah.
But we're not going to produce anything that we're going to put into production.
Sure.
Because that's not cheap. That's the space where I think that's like an evolution of all things sort of agile. But you have so many people, and for better, for worse, I think the DevOps space has got people even more amped up on shipping. And I'm all about shipping, right? Because that's, if you have to learn in production, you have to learn in production. But if you can learn outside of production, and that's where I think this idea of design of experiment is sort of interesting, because in production you don't control everything. And this is just a segue. This is probably why I'm so enamored by what's going on at Netflix, because Netflix and Facebook now have scale that no one else has. So you can't emulate that like Google can, because Netflix problem are scale, their dynamic traffic, and you can't just emulate that randomly. The best way to learn is sort of in production. But Most of the banks I work at, they don't have that problem.
Right.
And they don't spend enough time showing things to bankers,
Mm-hmm.
for instance, who are the primary interface to a lot of their customers. So if you have insurance companies, are the same kind of thing. Healthcare companies are often the same kind of thing, where it's not just the end customer. There's someone sort of in between. It's a captive audience. So you could get a subset of those people, get them to opt in, build a little simple thing, have them take 5 minutes and click through it and gather all those analytics and kind of say, did anybody go where we wanted them to go on this customer journey? If not, well, we shouldn't get all wound up about building it in Sprint 6.
Right.
But that turns out to be really difficult for people, because I think people have been so crappy at shipping for so long. When they start shipping, it's like an addiction.
Yeah.
I think we sort of need to unwind a little bit of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I see it where people are confident. They're willing to kind of say, oh, yeah, I think we can ship.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure we can break things down, microservices, blah, 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 DevOps, blah, blah, blah. Let's not ship. Let's learn outside of the code.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a good answer to your question.
That's
if
great. People
said in the Scrum space, or your traditionalist Scrum group, let's split our backlog into discovery work and delivery work. That might be a simple, concrete starting place for people.
What's been a book in the past few years that's really been impactful for you?
So the Netflickers just published this little, I don't even think it's 100 pages thing that you can get for free on the O'Reilly site about chaos engineering. I think that's really neat for the geek side of the house, because they're just doing all sorts of really fascinating stuff around resiliency. And that's happening, around, they don't own that, but it's a nice little book.
Yeah.
That would be sort of one.
Great.
One that I just reread that I could probably reread every 5 years and be humbled again is The Design of Everyday Things.
Mm-hmm.
It's just such a good book, and I'm bringing it up here because I think more people that call themselves engineers should read it.
I love that book.
It's so nice. When I was in Iceland last time, and there was the classic push-pull door.
Mm-hmm.
And the door moved both ways. But on the right-hand side, there was a picture of someone standing and pushing the door.
Yeah.
And on the other side, there was a standing picture of someone pulling the door. So even though the door went both directions,
it was very clear.
It was just really clear.
That's great. No, I was in Iceland 2 years ago, and I remember seeing that, thinking,
yeah,
that's genius. Another thing I want to ask you, tools. People love to talk about tools and things like that. What are some tools that you found that are very helpful for you in getting the work done that you do? I mean, whether it be a notebook or something more digital, what is something you like using? I know you talked about DevJam built that cardboard, which was really a cool product. But are there any other tools that you would suggest to people?
It never ceases to amaze me when I'm in a room with a bunch of people. It's not $1 million meeting, but it's not a 10-cent meeting.
Yeah.
And there's one whiteboard that's 3x4, and we run out of space, and then we stop talking, and I'm like, oh my God, So I don't know if I do this. In fact, I'm sure I don't do this well, but I don't get why companies aren't just painting walls with whiteboard paint everywhere, because more people drawing, those pictures aren't really good. Jeff Patton says we take pictures of whiteboards not because they're great drawings, because they're like vacation photos. That's a really nice riff.
It is good.
That would be one. There's a weird 3M product called Post-its, not the physical device. You put it on your phone. You can put a bunch of Post-its up on a wall, and I've been hacking with it for a few years now, and if you put the Post-its up in sort of like an XY coordinate, it captures all of your Post-its for them, and it puts you into either a CSV file or an Excel file.
Very cool.
And that works really nice because there's so much work that's done with Post-its that then dies.
Yeah.
That was one of the things I wanted to do with cardboard. I never got to it, was be able to just take a picture with that, serialize the CSV file into a set of cardboard, and just have them sort of pop up. And it's really dumb. It just does edge recognition, and then it just turns it into a photo. So it's not really doing character recognition, but for a lot of what we do, that's fine.
What's some of the best professional advice you've ever received?
So for sure, one of the people that has influenced me more than anyone, I think, in the last 20, 30 years is Ward Cunningham. And I was sitting with him out in Portland once, and I said, does it ever frustrate you that the amazing stuff you did at Tektronix just became so dumbed down? And he looked at me. And so first of all, this is not advice, but when you're around him, he's a pretty humble, brilliant person. And he said, no, I just go to the balcony. And I was like, what do you mean? He goes, well, I go to the balcony and I look down at myself and I say, would I appreciate my behavior? And it's some concept he took from someone else. But I think that's that's probably some of the best advice I've got. Because if you go back to the executive space, and I sit in those meetings, and I'm like, the data says no, right? Why do you keep saying yes? All the evidence says no. And I think I don't want to just bludgeon this person with the data. I want to understand their perspective. And I think Ward, I guess, Jeff and I and Ward and Alan Cooper were talking about this discovery and delivery thing. And Ward said, well, should we start with the things that are similarities or differences? And he's got all these like nice little patterns he uses to like spark discussions. And I think that humility and that reflective part is so much more important than how fast we can go with geekery, whether it's design geekery or programming geekery.
So the last question I always ask is, and to your point, I think that might be your answer, is for a leader, and I don't mean necessarily an executive, a person who is a leader within technology or design. What is, in your opinion, has been the most important characteristic that they need to have in order to be that successful leader?
Yeah, I think they have to figure out how wrong they're ready to be. So, I'll give you another Ward story. There used to be this thing called the Fit Lab, and there was all this automated functional testing, and there would be like 15 computers. And Ward walks in one day, we're all in there geeking out, and you could just see people go, because it was a joke then. It was like Kevin Bacon, like, what's your Ward number? So he stands up and he's like, who wrote blah, 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 some piece of code? And this guy like sheepishly raises his hand. Ward says, I just broke your code. We need to have a conference. And I thought, man, that's it, right? Yeah. He's so confident that he's thoughtful and intelligent and skilled that he's willing to kind of say, I made the mistake. I think that's more leaders need to pattern that it's not some hokey falling on the sword crap.
Yeah.
It's just kind of saying that seems wrong dispassionately. My best story about that is working in the Netherlands. In the States, we often say, I don't want to step on his toes. Yeah. The Dutch equivalent is, don't worry, I don't have big feet. Isn't that brilliant?
That's great.
Because but what scares people about working in the Netherlands is if you do something and I pointed something you did, there's 1 degree of separation between you and me. And so it's like, that doesn't work. That doesn't mean you're dumb.
Right.
It means that doesn't work. And I think that made it easy for me to work there.
I know you do a lot of talks and you do a lot of, you're doing a lot of writing and things. If people wanted to find out more about what David's doing, or, I would encourage people to go to YouTube and just search for David Hussman and watch all the YouTube videos because they're great. I love all your talks. But if people want to catch up with you and keep an eye on what you're doing, where should we go?
So I'm actually working on davidhussman.com, which I just was like, I don't know if I can take that seriously. But I asked a bunch of my friends, and they're like, what do you want to create a new brand for?
Sure.
So what I've been doing is I put things out there like ideas, experiences, presentations, and like videos, and I tried to gather a bunch of stuff. And this book I was talking about writing, I think I'm just going to publish it like a series of small essays. So there'll be some kind of an arc to it, where it starts out with that thing you were talking about, framing project, process, and product. Because I think you're right. We're into it. It's not about to happen. Yeah. We're into it, and we're not doing well. We're trying, right? But then I want to kind of talk about, like, hey, what if you're this small, like, nice little well-organized team? 1 team, 1 product. You're really bonded. Everybody has a lot of passion. How can we kind of take all things agile and design and just turn it up to 11? Yeah. And then the next series of essays that'll probably come out is like, well, what if you're not that? What if you're a large digital solution with multiple teams? And then the third one, this is where I've been doing a lot of interviews lately, is what happens when your company doesn't really have a strong sense of product? Like, what if there's a company here in Minneapolis, and I was sitting with one of the leaders in the business side. She said, well, we don't really have a product. We solve business problems for people. Right. And so they customize what they've produced for different companies. Sure. So it's not like, here's a Cheerio. That's not their MO. And that's the most complex space I've been in, because it's not, a lot of the traditionalist product stuff is too narrow. And the product people often say, well, you can't be like that. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. That's their business model. That's how they're successful. And it's the same kind of like custom core kind of discussion. Sure. And it cuts from the product right down into the code. I'm going to publish some of these interviews so people can sort of hear what I'm hearing descriptively instead of prescript. I don't know, a couple weeks, davidhussman.com.
All right. I love it. Well, thanks again, David, for joining me. Fascinating conversation. Really appreciate you taking the time to come by.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, that has been great.
And that's my conversation with David Hussman. I really hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I'm excited for 2018. There's a lot of really cool, amazing guests lined up already. So stick with us. And I'd love to hear any feedback that you guys have. If you haven't, make sure you hit the subscribe button and leave a review on iTunes. Thanks. Have a fantastic week.